Hello, hi, Mr. Leo Tilman. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm good. Nice to meet you.
Pleasure.
Tell me what you're doing here in this forum.
Excited to be here in Dubai at the Knowledge Summit. We are fascinated with what the region is doing and how it's investing in new ideas, new technologies, and the summit is the place to discuss it.
That's amazing. Tell me more about you. You work in Agilion, and you're the chairman of the company, and you've wrote a book. It's called Agilion as well.
Yes, so I wrote the book called Agility, and it's actually being translated into Arabic. So we're excited to launch it next year. Agilion is one of the companies that I founded, but it's really a culmination of my life's work. I was one of those weird mathematicians and physicists who came to Wall Street in the early 90s, almost 30 years ago, and sort of had my career gradually evolve into bigger questions, like how you manage corporations through uncertainty, how you manage crises, etc. So it's a super interesting culmination of so many things that I've done over the years.
Okay, so agility is to get through during crisis and to get through it and be agile in that form.
So I had a co-author who was a very famous American general
And the art.
who commanded armies and governments and so on. And what we realized a number of years ago is that everybody was talking about the need to be flexible and agile, but nobody really defined what that meant, and nobody outlined a framework on what it takes to actually do that, especially in a world where a lot of the things we encounter in geopolitics, in technology, we've never seen before. So how do you navigate an environment of uncertainty and disruption in this way? And how do you do it consistently so that if you're managing a company or an investor or a government, you're capable to do it over and over, irrespective of where disruption comes from.
So it's what you took from the army is their ability to be flexible and actually can pass certain crisis in their, so they are agile and they can be malleable in a way where they can adapt to the atmosphere that they are in.
Yeah, and it's really fascinating to merge all that knowledge and theory and experience with what has been done in finance, what has been done in business, what has been done in technology. So what we have done over the years is very deep integration of the knowledge and concepts and tools that enable you to do that. And some of them are relatively new, and some of them date back 200 years to Napoleon, right? But it's all about how you lead organizations, how you structure organizations, how you detect that the world has changed, how do you think about it, how you execute. So what's fascinating about our work is how many different fields of knowledge come together to empower today's leaders who face an entirely new set of challenges.
And why do we fall? Aren't we agile as a human being? Is it the system that's keeping us structured in a way where we cannot be more flexible and more agile in our work and companies?
It's fascinating you should say that, because we concluded the book with a notion that agility has been a human aspiration for a long time. And you see it in businesses, in individuals, in armies and governments, etc. There are certain factors that do constrain it, right? When you talk to certain kinds of leaders, they will say, oh, but we're too big, or we're too regulated, or whatever, and they have excuses for not doing that. There could be other factors that prevent creativity and innovation, etc. But there is also the new unknown that prevents us from reacting and being agile in a certain way. So it's really a combination of things. But as you said, on the one hand, you need to figure out what does it take to be agile in an environment like today. On the other hand, you want to remove the kind of constraints that people and organizations have. And I think it's the combination of the two, makes one successful.
Do you call that the Darwinism, which is like actually evolving from who you are and not being able to adapt more?
So you can call it that way. And my third book was called Financial Darwinism, and it talked about the need for adaptation. But I think this is really, I think agility is the right term. Agility, and for many people who think about human agility, intellectual agility, agility in sports, it's a very natural sort of metaphor, right? But as any kind of sports team or athlete would tell you, what appears to be spur of the moment agility is so pre-planned and so pre-rehearsed and thought through. So that's really an exciting combination of planning and strategy and analysis that goes into being agile. So it's not just a matter of managing crises in real time and being agile in real time. It's really a combination of preparation and capabilities in organizations that make one agile.
But leaving room for mistakes and for creativity.
Absolutely.
Which is not being afraid of that and not being afraid of the future.
So the mistakes part is really a matter of how you shape the culture, right? So a great deal of thinking has gone into what kind of leadership encourages agility. And part of that leadership is the ability to not just forgive, but sort of make mistakes part of the process, right? So if these are honest mistakes, as opposed to serious violations of ethics or legality, right? You have to kind of assume that they're part of the process and create an environment where it's natural, right? The creativity part is an interesting one because creativity needs to be empowered. So what's interesting about the military and some of the military examples is people think about militaries as very rigid. But in fact, militaries, especially in the West, have evolved into organizations that on the one hand have very defined purpose and vision and strategy. But then on the other hand, they go into extraordinarily lengths to empower decision-making, creativity, individual experimentation, and things of that kind. And now this entire train of thought is being transported to the corporate sector.
Yeah, but I feel like the hierarchy in the army kind of prevent that agility in a way. Like I used to be in the army, and they say, do it and then think about it, which is like you need to follow the orders in a way. So how can you be agile if this is where your thoughts coming from, the army system or agility?
So depending on the level within the organization, right? You will have more or less freedom to execute certain things. But at least in the United States and elsewhere, where the military gives in a guidance to something that needs to be achieved, they will not only tell you what needs to be achieved, they will give you what they call boundaries of initiative. They will say, we need to achieve this, but here are the kinds of things that you can do in terms of your own initiative and creativity to implement that. And depending on where you are in the organization, you will have broader or narrow boundaries of initiative. So that's the mechanism through which you make sure that everybody is unified around the purpose, everybody knows what needs to be done, but at the same time, you're giving them the boundaries in saying, be creative, be innovative within these boundaries. And that's so depending on the nature of the business and depending on the flatness of organization, right? It's actually a very flexible framework to say, in our business, movie-making business, you can be dramatically more creative. In certain other business that require very focused execution, it has to be done. But the mechanism is incredibly flexible to actually accommodate that. And that's one of the most counterintuitive examples of the military's applications to the corporate sector.
How we can take an example from an ordinary person, from a human perspective, how we become more agile? Is it by facing more risks in our life and having more experience that makes us, stronger and more agile?
I think the what you're describing probably is resilience, right? And the ability to bounce from adversity and learn, etc. Agility is more of a mindset combined with certain skills, right? And the mindset is that of, I am constantly studying my environment and I'm looking for threats and opportunities. And when it comes to threats, I want to avoid them. But I'm also in the business of very actively capturing opportunities and shaping my environment, right? So first and foremost, it's the mindset. And then the conversation becomes, what are your skills and tools and knowledge to be able to do that, right? How well do you understand your environment? How quick are you on your feet? Have you created certain plans, even in your mind, to say, if the future plays out in this way, these are the kinds of things I'm going to do. If it's plays out this way, it's a completely different set of responses. So it's really a combination of things. But I think sort of understanding that we operate in a world of incredible uncertainty and very, very fast change that will present all sorts of pivot points. And if we're actively looking for them, and if we are continually educating ourselves, we're going to become more naturally agile.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and when you talk about financial Darwinism, what do you mean about Darwinism?
So financial Darwinism was written as the global financial crisis was being created globally by finance and other global forces. And it was really a combination of the description of the environment at that time and the transformation within finance that was happening at the time, but also the notion that unless you fully understand the risks you're taking and you're very dynamically managing these risks, you're probably going to get extinct, right? So as we saw all of these investors and financial institutions loading up on toxic derivatives and structured products and not really thinking about risk, that was kind of a declaration to say, nobody can predict the future, but I suspect it's not going to end well for a lot of these players. And I think that's why the media said that the book Financial Darwinism predicted the global financial crisis. Of course, it didn't predict it in itself, but it highlighted behaviors and practices that were unsustainable. And as you can see, Financial Darwinism, which was more of a risk-centric discussion, led very naturally to the book Agility, which was much broader and integrated many more things in addition to risk.
Yeah, but there is a thin line between taking risk and also falling into falling into repeating the same thing or the comfort zone, for sure, in your business. And if you're too careful, sometimes it might kill the business as well.
Absolutely. So what's interesting about tolerance for risk, right? And in the world of finance, people call it risk limits and things of that kind. You have risk tolerance on both ends, right? Because if you're too reckless, you're probably going to endanger your business. If you're too conservative, you may never achieve the goals, right? So it kind of goes on both ends. So when we think about, structuring these processes in investments or finance or even business, the duality that you talk about is definitely there, right? And it has to be both on the too conservative side and too risky side.
You're a former BlackRock employee. I mean, such a huge company.
Yeah.
Does it really owns half of the world, BlackRock?
Well, I left it a long time ago, but I was there in the very beginning. BlackRock was still a startup when I joined. I was employee number 40, and the company had 20 billion under management as opposed to 13 trillion
Wow.
today. But it was a fascinating time. And, I keep comparing the intellectual excitement of Wall Street in the early 90s to today's environment surrounding AI, right? But back then, the whole new fields were invented, financial analytics and risk management. And we felt like the applied scientists who were creating all of these new disciplines. And so I look at that time with a great deal of nostalgia for the intellectual excitement of engine. But I think we're quite there with AI and what AI can do in a different realm, in a different world, but we are just as excited.
Yeah.
Just as excited intellectually. And being here, first of all, at the Knowledge Summit, but even more so in the Middle East, that is so receptive to these ideas and technologies. It's just exciting.
Yes, it is very receptive and have a potential, I would say, huge potential.
Yeah, I'm giving the closing keynote at today's conference, and I think that's what I will talk about. I will talk about an extraordinary opportunity facing this region and how proactively the region is taking advantage of it.
Leo Tilman, thanks so much. It was lovely talking to you.
Great to talk to you. Thank you.